Hello and welcome back to the Crazy Courage podcast. We have another wonderful guest with us, and her name is Pepper. She's been working on a project. Now, the project itself is exciting and interesting, but I feel like the story about the project and how it came to be and the challenges along the way are almost as exciting as the end result itself. So Pepper Ann is an author, and she's written a true crime book, and Anne's going to tell us all about it.
Well, thank you so much for extending an invitation for me to be here. I want to tell you I'm thrilled to be here. Yeah. Well, a little bit about me and my book. So I actually heard about a family member who I had no idea was related to, is known as a cattle rustler, and he has actually escaped jail twice. And he's known most for the most recent one, which was in 2001. It was in a small town in Sherman, Texas, and it made national news. And so that's what got me into the story a little bit, and it pulled me in. And once I started researching and doing my digging and everything, I realized that there were a lot of individuals who are still at play, who are out and about, and they never had to answer for their crimes before. So I got into this wanting to expose them. But the story is about a very colorful man who he is a sixth generation Texan, and he's lived the lives of many, many men. Yeah, he's done a lot in his life, and he's still alive. He's serving 14 life sentences in a Texas state prison. It's an amazing story. Yeah, I expose a lot of people. Yeah.
Wow. It sounds like an amazing story for sure. Now, this book is out there now. Like, you've completed it. It's published. We can read it. And I will put in the description of the episode where people can find this book. But it's out there. Like, the story's out there now.
Oh, it sure is. Yes.
Wow.
I expose crooked judges. I expose individuals in law enforcement. I expose criminals who have been in that lifestyle for, well, probably since they were young, I'm assuming. And I expose a lot of crooked people. And it took me a long time to write the story. It took me 12 years to write it because the individual
12 years.
Yes. The individuals I exposed had hacked into my computer and they deleted my work. So
How much does your heart sink when you turn on your computer and you see that file's missing?
I could have cried. I was so angry. So mad. I tried to walk away from it, and I couldn't, because it was my passion. It was my passion to be able to expose these people. Each had a family member, and so when it has to do with a family member, even someone you've never met, and then when you meet them and you hear the story, you just keep going.
Right.
Keep going.
So 12 years. Now, it took you 12 years. Is that mostly research time? Is that why it takes so long?
Well, part of it, I was researching up until the very end.
Okay.
As I was writing it, I was, because I had requested FOIA records. Those are records from the FBI, because they were involved in the investigation of the whole story. I had requested court records. I was interviewing victims, individuals of law enforcement, even individuals who were tied into the crimes that stepped forward and wanted to tell their story. So the whole time I was writing it, I was still researching it. But the reason that it took so long is because my work, it was continually being deleted. There were threats against my family. Our lug nuts were loosened on our tires many times. Wow. That's why it took so long. I think everything happens for a reason, and it's all in timing. I think over time, the individuals some of them who were involved in the crime stepped forward and they said, I want to share with this young lady what I have. And so it worked in my favor that it did take a long time, because eventually, as you age, people want to do the right thing.
They're ready. Okay.
Yeah.
To unburden themselves. So you're writing this book over the course of 12 years. Surely at some point with these things going on, you must be thinking, all right, I got to walk away. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you of an instance when I threw my hands up and I said, that's it, I'm done.
Right.
It was the final time I had to rewrite it. That second time it was deleted. And I said, that's it. I'm done. I believe they're signed, and I was fortunate to receive them. Um, there were people put in my life that had said, you need to continue on with this.
So you had support. So people were supporting you in this
Yeah.
project.
Oh, yeah.
That's
I
great.
have, if it hadn't been for those people, this book wouldn't be out there. I always want to mention the people that have helped me along the way, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be sitting here today. You wouldn't even know about me. But when I first took it on, I had hired a literary attorney, and she's been with me pretty much from the beginning. Yeah, when you meet people and you're taking on a project such as this, you have to connect. And
Yeah.
I finally got to her. She was the second attorney I had. But the first one, I liked her, but I got Gwen, and she's just been with me. I just love her to pieces. I've been with her for probably 13 years.
Wow.
Or she's been with me for 13 years, I guess. And then I got my editor, John, and he's been with me the whole time. And then my friends and my family have supported me, even strangers, people that would hear the
Really?
story and they'd say, you got to continue on. And then at the very end, when I decided it was time to move with the book, to print it, to publish it, get it out there, I got my PA. I have an amazing support system. I have great professionals around me, and if I hadn't had them, like I said, you wouldn't even know who I am. You wouldn't be talking to me right
Right.
now.
Right. Right. And I hear that a lot. Like people who are starting their own business or taking on these kind of projects that turn into a business will say that, yeah, they put together a team, and it's important to have that support system, because people backing you and getting you to overcome your fears and doubts when you just want to throw your hands up and walk away.
Yeah.
Those are the people that you need behind you to push you back in the ring and keep fighting. And then also putting together a team. But like you said, like the first attorney that you're dealing with, maybe it didn't click, wasn't the right fit, but then you did find the right person, and that relationship has lasted. So it made sense to keep looking for the right person to keep your eyes open. And now you have a personal assistant, you've got a team, you've got the support. That's one of the biggest keys to success, is having these things in your corner, for sure.
Well, I had a lot of I had a lot of things happen while I was writing the book. The reason it was time to publish it after 12 years,
Yeah.
it was time to do it, but I was getting more information that was coming in about some of the individuals and how they were able to skate out of their crime, how they didn't have to
Interesting.
serve time. But there was another individual tied up with the individuals I exposed, and they were trying to steal my story.
Oh,
At the very end, yeah, the last year or so, is this ever going to end? While I was going through all of this, all the people in my life were right there, and they were saying, keep going. Don't worry. Don't look at what's going on the outside. You've got the story. Keep going. They've been amazing. I've had an amazing support system. And
that's fantastic.
if you are thinking about becoming an author and you want to write nonfiction, especially true crime, I always say get a team together. And
Yeah.
well, sure, you got them in your corner, because you're going to need them. Obstacles, things always come up. You have to be prepared, you know.
You need to be able to bounce your ideas off someone. You need to get advice from people who've done this sort of thing or work in those circles. Yeah, this is your first book, right? That you've had published?
It is. It's my very first book. I was going to tell you, I actually self-published, so I'm an indie author.
Oh,
When I first took this on, I thought, okay, I want to publish this traditionally.
okay.
It's a dream. Everybody wants to do that, right? If you want to write, you want to be an author. The literary agents that I reached out to, usually, if they're not interested in your story, they don't have time to respond
Right.
to everyone. You don't hear anything from them. They're not interested. You just assume it's over. And they can
Yeah.
even reach out to you a year later, maybe longer. I had a lot of literary agents reach out to me, and they said, you got a great story. It's not something I can sell. You got to keep going. And the reason they couldn't do it is because it's a regional story. It's based here in
Okay.
Texas. And so someone in New York might have a harder time telling it than someone in the South. Or that was kind of what they were thinking.
Okay.
But yeah, I published it as an indie author, and I love my team, the people that I have around me so much
Yeah.
that I want to continue to publish my book as an indie author. If I ever had an offer to publish my books traditionally, I wouldn't. I wouldn't do. I don't want to leave the people who helped put me where I'm at.
No, of course not. And you appreciate the people that have helped you. And why would you want to lose that? So now I have so many questions. But when you're writing this book, it's your first book, you decided, okay, I'm going to write this story. How did you go about doing that? Like, how did you go about, I mean, researching it, just even researching, how do you just pick up a pen and a tape recorder or whatever and just go talk to people and start getting your story?
Well, what I did was I researched all of the articles online that had to do with the story because I thought I want to know what I'm up against. Then I started reaching out to law enforcement. I thought, okay, before I reach out to uh, family members, which I did, I ended up speaking to them. I wanted to get the background from professionals who dealt with all of these criminals because I need to know what I'm up against. So I read the article and then familiarized myself with them. Then I reached out to law enforcement. And I had asked the sheriff's department in Grayson County, where the second jail escape happened, if I could speak with the sheriff who oversaw it, with anybody and everyone, the DAs, the judges. So I started with law enforcement. And then, of course, I had reached out to my family member, my cousin, and I told him that was actually the first step. I said, I want to write this. And then after we made that connection, I started researching and going that route. I was nervous the first time I reached out to some of the victims because I
Sure.
want to always be respectful of people being related to one of the perpetrators. Let me just explain a little bit. He was involved in an 8-hour shootout
Wow.
or a standoff against law enforcement, and he and another uh, offender had held a married couple hostage in their home for 8 hours.
Wow.
But he had released them. He worked with the authorities and got them safely out of the home. But there were a lot of things that had happened, and so I thought, I'm not sure how people are going to react to me. So I treaded very lightly. I asked law enforcement, do you think it might be okay if I reach out to this person? In those instances, either yes, it was, or no, it wasn't. You have to be mindful. People, I didn't want to approach anything in a disrespectful manner. I did not want to do that. I didn't want anyone having to relive anything. That makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
I reached out and they were so welcoming to me.
Really?
A lot of the victims. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm still in touch with them today, family members. So I just took that first step. I was nervous, but I did it.
Good.
And I got a yes from one, a yes from another, and it just kept going. Just,
Oh, that's fantastic. I wouldn't even know how people would react to that sort of thing. Like when you just decided, all right, I'm going to reach out to law enforcement, that was kind of your first point of contact, right? For trying to get a hold of these victims afterwards. Now, were they receptive, law enforcement?
yes, yes. They
Oh,
were
so they were willing to speak to you.
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. They were in Grayson County. They were wonderful. The ones who were not were the Texas Rangers.
Okay.
And that's okay. I didn't need them to tell the story because I had the story from all these other individuals in law enforcement who were willing to speak with me. Um, I picked up the phone. I was nervous. I picked up the
Yep.
phone. I explained to the receptionist, who she was a receptionist to Sheriff Gary. Sheriff
Okay.
Gary was the one in Grayson County. He was the one who kind of oversaw everything from the escape to bringing everyone in. And I told her, I
Okay.
said, who I am. This is what I'm doing. Would he be willing to talk to me? I think I was fortunate enough that I got the right person, and it just happened. They gave me transcript They gave me their sheriff's reports. They gave me everything. So one of the most important things to me, taking this project on and knowing I was going to self-publish, I wanted it to be as professional as it could be. I didn't want anyone questioning me. So I thought I have to get all of the correct information. Then I let my editor kind of direct me from there. What we need, this is how you're going to do it. And I listened. I listened to him. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't like what my editor said." Well, if you want it done right, you got to listen to these people. They know what they're doing.
Right.
I had to be willing to listen, and I was. So,
Hey, that's fantastic. I'm impressed and surprised, I guess, that people were so forthcoming and willing to share their stories. Like, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes. If I were to write this kind of book and I was trying to do the research, I'd be nervous as heck as well, trying to pick up the phone or calling whoever. I'd be stumbling over my words, I'm sure, not as eloquent as you, of course. But, I just worried that they would just shut it down right away and it'd get a lot of no's and get stonewalled. But it sounds like you had better luck for sure. And like you said, you're speaking to the right person. The gatekeeper for the sheriff was happy to put you through and get that ball rolling for you. Fantastic.
but that doesn't always happen. It
No.
doesn't always happen. It's always the right timing. I know this is going to sound crazy, but if it's meant to be, it'll be. And I had such a passion for telling this story. And I knew that once I got it, I started researching. I thought to myself, these people are not going to want to talk to me when they find out who I'm related to. And then I got a yes. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. So it just went from there. I was fortunate.
Wow. And were any of the victims concerned about your relationship?
I was very open with people. When I asked if I could speak with them, I was very open with them. And I said, this is who I am. I'm related to this individual. And I want to know if you would be willing to speak with me. And they respected me more because I was open with them. At least that was the case in law enforcement. I was told by one of the DAs, if you hadn't have told me and I'd have found out later, I'd have been real upset. So you have to be you have to be very forthcoming. You have to be upfront with people. You should be. But the victim, I hate calling a victim because they're amazing people. The Foresters, that's the family who was released in their home. They view Bob a little differently than they do the other offender who was involved in the in everything, the shootout and all this. So make no mistake about it, Bob was just as much involved. I mean, he was the one who was behind the escape.
Wow.
His reasons for doing it, I go into detail in the book why he had escaped. And even though it was not right, he had escaped because all the individuals, when everything went down, the cattle wrestling scheme, and he had married a woman who was involved in blackmailing people at a party ranch they had because she had videotaped them in uncompromising positions. So he was the only one who landed in jail, even though she turned herself in and she got out. He was the only one that landed in jail for all of that. And I guess he was mad, he was angry, and he was trying to go back to where these people were and they weren't home. And I go into detail in the book, but the people that I contacted, the victim, I can't believe how close we've all become. And they were very open with me about what happened. Vincent and Irma are the couple that are held at the very end. And Bob released them. Bob's my cousin. Vincent used to always make a statement to me, don't be so hard on Bob. Don't be so hard on him. And I said, Vincent is rearing. He didn't have a good rearing. Somebody has to tell him. And I'm that family member that will. And so we just became real close.
That's unexpected, I would think.
Yeah.
But that is really, really neat. I mean, you guys connected on, a very personal level, of course. They're sharing a very personal story that affected them, and you're digging into a story that involves your family and with all the threats and people doing things to you and your family that you're involved in a different way as well in this whole thing. So, yeah, I can see how that would bring you closer. Absolutely.
Yeah.
makes sense to me for
And
sure.
I had, and I think another reason it kind of connected us all is because I had explained to them what had happened in Bob's life earlier and how he had got caught up with all these people. I did that because they asked me. I wasn't trying to push the story on anyone by no means. But
Okay.
they wanted to know more about Bob. So I told them. And once they knew the story, it seemed like doors just opened and we just connected. And I was told by family members of Vincent that Irma had passed. I did an interview with her on the phone that she had passed when I went to the family. And I was told that there was a healing for Vincent. He was able to heal talking about
Wow.
it. So I think it was healing for him, and understanding for me of what they went through. And my journey has been amazing so far. And it's just the first
Yeah.
book.
It's just the first book. Yeah, looking forward to the next projects, right? For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so incredible though that when you're talking to these people and they're asking you about Bob and they want to know more about him, because I think at the end of the day, we see movies and shows and you're easily painting someone as a bad guy or a good guy. But really, at the end of the day, it's not that black and white. People make mistakes. People make poor choices. Does it necessarily make them evil? No. Does it necessarily make them bad people? No. Have I made mistakes in my life? Yes. But, do I try to live my life to the best of my ability to be a good person? Yes. Will I make mistakes? Probably, I'm sure. All this to say, I think it helps to talk about people and humanize them because we're just all out there trying to figure it out for ourselves. At the end of the day, we do make poor choices and we do make mistakes, but it's not as easy as painting someone as evil or bad. And to the credits to Irma and Vincent for asking more questions about Bob just to find out and understand and better appreciate who he is as a person because we're all just people.
I agree. I agree. And then there were parts of the story that I had learned when the offenders had escaped the jail. They were in the run for 4 days. They terrorized a lot of people in North Texas, and there were a lot of people who were hurt. And so I don't excuse that. There's not an explanation for that, but there were a lot of people who were hurt. And I'm explaining it to these individuals, but then I also have family members who had never heard of Bob. And so I was trying to explain it to them. So I had to get a good grip story of the situation.
Sure.
And I tried to explain it the best way I could to all these people because, like you said, everyone kind of wants to put a story with a face and understand. Sometimes
Yeah.
people are because it's important when you're telling a story to do that. And then I had to write it.
And then you
So
had to write.
I had 3 times I had to come out and explain it, explain it to the individuals that were victimized, the victims, and then family, and then I had to write it.
And now you had to write this 3 times, right? Starting over from scratch each time. Do you feel that your, we'll say, draft changed each time you wrote it? Did it evolve? Was there marked differences?
There were some marked differences,
Yeah.
but each time I had to do it, it was better. My editor, I had family members, all kinds of people were saying, "Let me see if I got a copy of the last one," and they didn't. No one had it, so I had to start over. Um, it evolved, and
It
I
evolved.
believe that the final one that we have now is perfect. The first one, okay, maybe it should have been deleted. Not the second one, but it happened. I remember the important part. I remembered what was important, and my editor did too. And he said, "All right, let's add this information in." I think the longer it took me to write it, the more involved it became.
Which makes sense,
It,
right?
I don't know anyone else who's written a story that many times and not given up.
Right. No, me neither. If it were me, I don't know that I would have the same resilience as you. And I'll I'll preface this by saying that I have a lot of respect for authors. Just taking on a project of that magnitude to write a whole book, pour it out of your head, 12 years worth of work. And this isn't fiction. This isn't something you're just inventing on the fly and you decide happy ending or not. This is something you've had to go out and research in a manner that you've never done before. It's the first time you've ever done it. You're talking to law enforcement, asking them questions that you've never had to ask before, talking to people who are victims of a crime and to get their stories out. I respect your process so much. So that being said, I don't know that I could do it to start with. I'd be like, well, this would be a fun story and then move on to the next thing for sure. I can't imagine I would have the fortitude to write the book. So I'm very impressed that you're able to do that. And every author, I give them credit 100%. But to have to start that over twice after you've poured your heart out, that has got to be so demoralizing. And I give you as much credit as I possibly can, because that to me is a very impressive feat for sure. But now that we're talking about it, gives us a really cool story to talk about the writing of the story. So I don't know, it builds into the whole mystique of the book. The other authors are just sitting at a typewriter. I say typewriter because, that's what I imagine in my head. We're all using computers these days. But I imagine, the other writers just sit there, writer's block, drinking coffee, petting the cat, moving around the house. Not really many stresses in their lives when it comes to writing. But the stress of writing the book, don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying, if you've got like a story within a story, almost a sequel to your book, if you want to add like extra chapters. But I really do appreciate the process you had to go through. And I'm glad you're able to tell that to me today.
Thank you. Before I took this project on, I had worked with private investigators in the past. Now, I was not a licensed PI, but I'd worked alongside some great people who were. And it's kind of how I learned maybe where to dig, how to dig, be persistent.
Interesting.
And I think that is actually what kept me going, were those skills that I had learned and knowing what I had uncovered. And I kept thinking, okay, if I don't tell the story, the victims who they didn't really want to talk to anyone else, they talked to me. The people who committed some of the crimes that didn't want anyone to know about their affiliation, they only spoke to me. And then, of course, I had family. And I wanted to stop these people. I wanted to expose them. And the people that I was exposing were individuals from Bob's past, from the 80s, who paid his bonds when he got in trouble with an individual in law enforcement. And I thought, if I don't expose these people, if I don't write this, then they're gonna always be protected, and that's not right. So
Right.
that's actually what that was probably the driving factor for me.
So justice, a little bit of justice there. Wow.
I didn't want my family member to be the only one sitting behind bars. It's not right. The truth needs to be out there. In the articles, that was the one thing. Everyone reads everything that he did, but we're not reading what the people prior to all of this happened. And yes, he has done a lot. He has. But if we're going to tell a story, tell the whole story.
Apparently you're the right person for the job.
Oh, then, yeah.
All right, so Pepper Ann, now you touched on working with private investigators in your past. So that's a good segue. So how far back in time do we have to go to figure out how you got to writing the book?
Well, I'd heard about the story back in 2006 when my grandfather passed away. And I heard about it at a funeral. Bob's father was at my grandpa's funeral. And so Bob and I are cousins. And his father and my mom were first cousins. So basically, Bob's grandpa and my grandpa were brothers. So I didn't know about his grandpa. He didn't know about mine. But so it goes back maybe to 2006. And I let it go for a little while. And then I guess life kind of took over. And then I had worked with PIs and I got that experience. And then somewhere along the way, I just kind of picked it back up. And I thought, okay, let's do this. So I did. The story had always kind of been in my mind, but for some reason, I guess I didn't reach out because other things had taken
Sure.
root. I've always had an interest in wanting to write though. So ever since
Okay.
little, love to read and solve mysteries, not necessarily murders. And when I do crime, I don't necessarily want to go that deep in gruesome stuff. But
Yeah.
who is the famous detective growing up?
Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes, yeah. I'd always had that. I bet so and so did it. I wonder who did it. You know, the game Clue was always real popular
Right.
at home.
Okay.
So I think it was a lot of that. But back in 2006 is probably when it kind of sparked, when it started.
So in 2006, you heard this story. And at what point did you think, wow, this would make a great book?
I think I always kind of thought about it, but it wasn't until I started going through the articles, which was probably 2 years later. And then once I read it and I thought, why weren't these other people charged? There had to be other people involved in this. And so that's when I started. So it was shortly after. It was probably a couple of years after that.
Things were in motion in your head.
Well, so my mom had told me, she said, that's our cousin over there. He has a son who's in prison. And I was thinking, okay, well, we'll stay away from them. Because you know, I've never been in a jailhouse before. I've never been in trouble before. And I'm thinking prison, ooh, that's big stuff. That's big time. But once I started researching and digging and I realized, wait a minute, there's something here. And so then I thought, okay, let's dive into this.
I'm going to tell you, I've never been in a prison myself. Yeah, that would be intimidating. I would be intimidated for sure.
Yeah, I was. I will say this though, the guards and the wardens were always wonderful with me. They were always watching out for me. Once I got in there, everyone was very respectful to me, even to this day. So I've never had any problems. And the individuals I interview, everyone has just been wonderful with me, all around wonderful. Yeah, on both sides of the fence. Yeah.
Hey, that's great to hear. That's great to hear. I mean, considering all the other challenges you've had on the outside.
Yeah, you're right.
So you've written this book. And you self-published this book, and it's available for purchase. And well, again, I will put the links in the description so people can do that. Now, is the story done? Is there more to this story?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the first book is done.
First book.
I would consider writing a follow-up, another book. A serious investigation is never done, but a serious investigation would have to be done. There were people who were supposed to serve time for their crime, facilitating an escape for just all charges, and these individuals had gotten out of their crime all the same way. And there's an individual at the very top of this thing, and they have paid for other people to stay out. And so when I did my research, I found things in jails and courthouses, and the ladies who found the information and would give it to me, they'd say, why didn't they serve time? This person was supposed to serve time. And I told one lady, I don't know. You're the one in the jailhouse giving me the information. You tell me, why didn't he get time for this? So, yes, if there is a second book to write, I would be the one to do it. But there has to be an serious investigation.
Okay, serious investigation. So beyond your own just being able to speak to different people, like we're talking an actual investigation. Hopefully, if that happens, you can follow along and pick up some notes.
Oh, yeah, I'll be right there.
Pepper Ann, you've talked to me about another project that you're working on, completely unrelated. Well, I say completely unrelated, but it has nothing to do with this particular story. But why don't you tell me what I would tell our wonderful audience what it is you're working on?
Okay, my next project, I'm actually working on two of them. Both of them are a fiction crime series. And the first one is called Penny Pearl Mystery. And I love this one because it's fiction, but it's got a little comedy. So it's a young lady who is trying to solve cases.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a lot of fun. My editor is helping me with this. and we are just having a blast with it. This is about a young lady who is solving cases, and she gets in the way of law enforcement, not on purpose, and they end up working with her throughout the series. But the first book should be released. I don't know when. I was hoping it'd be released this past summer, and I missed that deadline. So I'm working as quickly as I can.
Still in the work. Okay.
It's kind of based in the 80s, maybe the 90s. So it's got a lot of good humor in it. And then I'm branching off from that, and a family member or someone tied to this young lady, Penny Pearl, uh, has two older aunts that are also detectives. They're sleuths, and they're called the Traveling Tootsies. So I've got both of those I'm working on. Yeah.
Those sound like fun. And I got to say, they sound like a little bit less, well, they seem more lighthearted, maybe a little less pressure on yourself in terms of the research and intimidation and different things going on. Now, is that what you wanted out of your next project, just something a little lighter?
I did. I did. I think after the first book and all of the threats and everything that my family has been through, I decided I want to take on another project or two projects that are more lighthearted. And while I'm working on these two projects, I'm constantly getting information for my next nonfiction true crime
Okay.
story, and that takes time. That's another thing. It could take, if you're trying to get FOIA records, that can take anywhere from 6 months to 1 to 2 years.
Oh,
So
that long.
it does, yeah, because they get so many requests.
Fair.
So I want to stay busy. So that's what these projects are, and they are fun.
The best part of it's fun. So this other true crime nonfiction that you're working on, now that's not related to your first book.
No, it's not.
Okay.
And I have a couple of different ones that I'm kind of playing with, a couple of different ideas. At first, I thought I was going to do one, and then I didn't to move to the other. So, something I've learned, I don't know how other authors do it who write true crime, but for me, I don't know if it's because I'm an indie author, so it's a little harder to get information sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes if you don't get all the information you need, you have to move on to another project. If
I
records
see.
can't be
Interesting.
found, you have to, move to another story. I'm trying to get records from several different stories that I'm interested in. And
Okay.
when I get everything, then I'll have a better idea of what I'm working
Well,
on.
I mean, it makes sense, right? Because you're trying to write a book. If you have gaping holes in terms of the story and what went on, it's tough for you to move forward with that project. I can see how you would have to move on. You're like, look, I'm sorry, it's just not there. I can't write about it.
And my thing is, I don't want to tell a story that's already been told. I want to tell
Okay.
a side of a story that's never been told. So if I can find something that people aren't aware of, that's what I'm looking for. And that's what was so important with my first book, because I thought, okay, people don't know this, and I want to tell it.
Articles are one thing, right? I mean, and they just usually talk about the surface stuff and what you can easily find online or whatever. To do a book, you really got to pull some records, talk to people that were involved, and really get in there. I mean, I've been working on it for 12 years, so clearly, it's going to be a little more than an article for sure. Articles are written by people who have very tight deadlines and not a lot of time to write these things. So I certainly can appreciate how you have a whole side of a story underneath the surface, and I guess you just got to figure out what side of the story it is that you want to tell.
I've always come out with the thought that I don't want to sway anyone. I want everyone to have the facts for all the information I found, and I want them to form their own opinion.
Okay.
I don't want to sway anyone one way or the other. I think it's important when you hear a story that we should make our own decisions. Is this right? Is this wrong? This is what
For sure.
happened. I think that's what reporting is supposed to be. I grew
Yes.
up when we would hear the story, we would all form our opinion, but we just have
Right.
the facts, and that's what I want to do. I just want to provide facts that have not been told before.
So it less about your opinion about what was going on, more about the stories of the victims, the facts, the court records, all that stuff. Just let it speak for itself, essentially.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it was important because when I spoke with some of the victims, they would say, well, this is what happened. I hadn't told anyone that. And I thought, okay, if they're sharing it with me and they're giving me permission, then this is something that should be included with their permission. It
Right,
makes the story.
right.
The thing is, when something happens and there's three people there to see it, there's three sides to a story.
Yeah,
And it's
you're absolutely correct.
yeah, and
Yes.
it's different. And I think to me, I'm hoping I believe that I did, but when I told my story in the first book, I was trying to tell it from all angles, not just one. Uh, because you need to know
Fair.
everything going on around you. I think it's important.
I 100% agree. So I guess it's safe to say you've been bitten by the writing bug then, right? I mean, you've got a book in the can, one that's out there, people are reading, and the stories out there, people are learning, getting the facts that you've so painstakingly took the time to gather. And then now you're working on some other books. You got other projects. So I feel like this is you now. You're Pepper Ann, the author.
It took me a while to get here, but yes. And my PA, Laura, had told me, she said, if you want to get known, you have to put more work out there. And so I've also written short stories that have been included in several anthologies.
Oh, nice.
And it kind of gets me out there a little more. At
Well,
first, she was saying, why don't you write some fiction? I thought, oh, I don't want to write fiction. Now I want to write fiction. I think that I'm kind of making a name for myself and I like it. I went into this with a whole different perspective. I went into it thinking I just want to write a story. I want to tell it. And I had no idea everything that was involved, business side of things. And I like it so much. I want to keep going.
when you got into it, what did you think? So when you got into it, you figured, I'm going to write a book. What did you see for yourself afterwards? Did you see anything else at that time?
In the very beginning, you know what I actually believed? I actually believed, okay, I'm going to write this story. I'm going
Yeah,
to find a literary agent. I'm going to let them take care of the rest. Um, not the case. It's not
not
the case.
this.
You have to be accepted by
Right, right.
people. You're
Yeah,
writing your
yes,
work. And then
yeah.
once I realized that's not the route I'm going to go, it's not for me, then it opened up, doors opened up. The hardest part for me was the marketing. It was
Right.
getting on the socials and making that happen. And when you're writing, when you're an author, I don't exactly know how it works for traditionally published authors. I know that they have people promoting their work, but they also have to promote their own.
Sure.
Myself, I have to promote it. I not only write it, research it, and fact check. I have my editor, but I have to promote it. I set up my own book signing. I go to book events. So there's so much behind the scenes work that people don't realize.
Of course. Yeah. That's it. When you're owning a business or you're working on your dream, your passion, or you want to get it out there, it's great if you're doing all the hard work of writing the book, doing the research. That's only one part of it, right? You've got to do all the other stuff, the marketing, the admin, all the stuff that's a lot less glamorous, we'll say,
Yeah.
but it's got to get done. Now, did you ever think that you had more than one book in you?
I'd always thought that I had several books in me, but the reason I didn't push forward until I got the story because I'd always read that you have to have a story that would stand out. You have to
Okay.
have a story that's going to catch everyone's attention. And the fact that this had been in the media, in the news. Then I also heard that you have to explain why you're the one to tell the story. What am I going to say that's going to convince the agent that I'm the one to do it? And you know what? It wasn't until that third time when I had to write this, I I threw all that doubt aside and I said, this is mine. I'm the one to do it. I'm going to self-publish it. I
Wow.
have experience. I'm the family member. And one thing about it, when you have a family member that writes a story about a loved one, they have their own questions. You have a family that is asking why, who, what, when, and then they go back to those same questions. until they're satisfied. So felt like I got
Interesting.
information nobody else would have because I just
No,
did.
I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes,
Wow.
I've always had several stories in me. I just didn't think any of them were interesting enough to catch anyone's attention. Maybe I
Now
can
that
write
ship
them.
has sailed. No, you've got the interesting stories now. Now we're good. This is you now.
Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, Pepper Ann, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me and taking the time to talk about your story within a story, I will say. And can't wait to see what your other projects are going to look like when they're completed as well. And again, life of an author, I know that's not easy. So I know you're trying to pump out those books, and I wish you all the best to get those out so people can enjoy them.
Thank you. I'm enjoying doing it. So thank you. I appreciate that, the well wishes on them.
You're very welcome. And look, I wish you all the best and thanks again.
Thank you.